Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Mad Mamluks. We've got an exciting show for you today, but before we get started, I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsors, those guys that pay our bills. First of all, if you are working and you have money, you want to make sure that money is in good hands. So for that, we have Wahed&nbsp. So put your money there. Don't put it in the haram savings accounts. Otherwise, unless you want to go to war with Allah and His Messenger. Once you got money, then you got to get married, right? So go to halfardeen.com, get hooked up there. Stay away from the club, go to halfardeen.com. And then after you get married, you might die at some point. So you want to make sure your assets, you don't want to make sure, your wife doesn't become a Christian or something. You can put that in your will, and you can do that through mywasiya.com, and we will have a description in the show notes with a discount for Mad Mamluk subscribers. So now getting started on the show, I want to, first of all, this is Mahin, and I'm here with my co-hosts, Shaykh Amir, Saeed, and Sim. And today's show, we are blessed to be in the company of a good friend of ours, Asrar Ahmed, who is a federal investigator and also on the board of the oldest masjid in Illinois. So I think he's a unique person to talk about the subject that we're going to talk about today, with some of the issues that we are finding throughout the U.S. as far as some of the drama happening with masjid boards and maybe people of religious authority getting, in some hanky-panky situations.
Getting caught with their pants down?
Yeah.
All right?
Literally.
Just throw it out there?
Yeah.
Just throw it out there. We can't dance with our words in this
I don't
episode.
think they're actually getting caught with their pants down. People are hearing about them.
Or reading about it.
Right. Well, Asrar, how did you get involved with masjid board work?
Yeah, so first of all, let me thank you guys for having me here. I just want to say quickly that I was there the night this idea of Mad Mamluks was conceived.
Ooh,
and I believe they were using their Apple headphones to record the first episode or something.
Wow,
like that.
yeah.
So I was there for that, and you've been away for a while, but congratulations on all your success. And want to say,
is this the kind of conceiving that happens through lovemaking?
It's
this is almost 3 years ago, man.
Yeah. It's been some time.
Wow.
But I was there when the idea was being kicked around, and for the record, I think I was the one who said this is a terrible idea.
and I think you're not wrong.
It's too late now, though.
But, and on a serious note, before we begin, I want to say that although I'm a federal investigator, anything that I say here or any hypothetical situations that we go through as we discuss the serious topic are solely my own. They don't represent the position or the opinion or the any type of situation with the federal government, and so these viewpoints are solely my own. Number two, we're going to be speaking, I think, in hypothetical, so we'll try not to address anything directly as far as these situations go for sensitivity to the victims and to the people involved, but the situations have to be discussed. So
yeah, any relation to active investigations is purely coincidental. The names and all events are all
made up.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So you've got a pretty good job. Why in God's name would you join a masjid board?
So our previous president, I mean, we're on I've worked across two presidents now at the masjid. He was a little bit older. He's obviously still with us, but he was a little bit older. But he really believed in empowering the youth. And there's always the argument: when are these old people gonna get off the board and let the youth do something? And so the last president actually made an effort to do that. And so I think at that time, this was like 3 years ago, there were about 6 or 7 youth that joined the board, which is huge on a board of 20 people. And then our new president's I think 40. So it's pretty young relatively for being on a masjid board. And so he continued the legacy of carrying on with the youth, and we still have about that many board members, but we have committee leaders that are also young. So so this is kind of in with the new and fresh ideas.
Yeah, man. I walked into the boardroom. I know some of them. I didn't even know some, because some of them are younger than me. Some of them are like 5 years younger than me. So it's pretty awesome.
Yeah,
it's refreshing.
Can we say the name of your masjid? Is that okay? Or
yeah.
Okay, so you're with MCC, and that's probably the first masjid we went to when we were kids.
Yeah,
even before.
It was the first one to especially be mega masjid, right?
I mean, yeah, definitely.
Sunday schools, this, that. That's what Qari al-Basit came in the mid-'80s to come and recite You know, it was pretty.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Always happened. Oh yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that masjid is they call it the mother of masjids.
Yeah, on YouTube when you see the background in red, that's MCC where Qarib al-Basid is reading.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then MEC is also under MCC jurisdiction, right? It was founded later.
Yeah, so you have MCC, then you have MEC, then you have a high school now. You have 2 full-time schools there. You know, it's about 3-4 buildings. So it's expanding. It's one of the bigger masjids. So that's why this topic that we're going to delve into is important for this masjid as much as it is for any masjid across America.
Agreed.
Let's just jump into it. You being a board member and you hear about some kind of abuse happening at your mosque, how do you handle that?
Yeah, and you being an attorney too, so it comes, you know, it's a lot coming from you.
Yeah, so I just want to, since we named the masjid, alhamdulillah, and where I'm at, I just want to say, alhamdulillah, you know, in my experience, in the past 3 years, there hasn't been a complaint of such activity in our masjid. So alhamdulillah for that, and alhamdulillah, Allah protect the masjid going forward. You know, but you know, I think that you mentioned one thing that there's a legal matter, but I think if you dissect the situation into 2 parts, there's a cultural matter, and then there's a legal matter that comes afterwards. So from the masjid perspective, of course, liability is a huge thing because, you know, if certain acts are done by a masjid employee, or if something's done inside the masjid space, you know, you're pretty much bound to liability for across a lot of various theories. But the other problem is, I think what some of the groups that have sprung up are trying to address is, in what type of culture has to exist in order for this type of behavior to be bred, you know? So what kind of religious space is this where you have, you know, people being molested or raped or whatever else? Because first comes the situation, then comes the legal action, right? So legally you can always set up safeguards, but that doesn't start a criminal, because we have laws which we consider our safeguards. We have punishments, you know, just in the world, and you still have crime. So it's a matter of culture. So that's, you know, from my perspective, if I were to address the situation, I would say you have to first fix the culture before you arrive at the legal.
But you're talking about the culture of the masjid, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, but don't you think that there could be some kind of pervert that comes to your mosque? You have a great culture going on. You know, I mean, everyone is doing all kinds of activity, and, you know, proper implementation of Islamic etiquette is being implemented in your mosque. Let's just establish that. But it still does not prevent a person with malicious intent coming to your mosque and taking advantage of a child, and they molest a child, all right, and they run away, or they get off. Okay, this is not. Let's just say in this situation, this is not a person that is on the board or even an employee at the mosque, but they're a visitor who comes to the mosque. They perform something, some sexual impropriety, and then they take off. Now the parents find out, they report it to Asrar. What does Asrar do?
Or do they report it? Are they supposed to even report to? Can I just interject with that? Like protocol, I think everyone should have an understood protocol. I mean, it sucks we have to talk about this when we're talking about masjids. But what should the protocol be? Should they go to Asrar first because he's an attorney? Should they go to the board? Should they go to the head office? Or should they go straight to the police?
So, you know, this is a really complex question because it's multifaceted.
Yeah.
So the crime itself is heinous.
Yeah.
What has occurred is, you know, unforgivable, and you don't want to think about it because we all have children.
Yeah.
Right. Or we have spouses.
Yeah.
And we're somebody else's spouse. So this, you know, in every way we're connected. But if something like this unfortunately does occur, look, from a strategic perspective, what you want, the most important thing is preservation of evidence, right? So if suppose that something does happen to a child, you know, that's you know, a molestation or whatever. Number one thing is always going to be, I would say, run to the ER, because at the ER they can do a lot of testing and things like that off the bat to make sure, first of all, our child is safe, right? So once we have the child's safety is whatever we can salvage at that point, right? Then you want to make sure you preserve the evidence.
Is that irrespective of the timing? Like, so let's say it gets reported like a week after the fact. Like, is there a statute of limitations on when you take them to the ER?
No, there's definitely not statute of limitations for something like that. Statute of limitations comes into effect in crimes usually when you're going to charge somebody.
I mean, sorry, that's probably the wrong term, but like, is there like, because like, if something happens right now, and then it gets reported a week later, are they going to find remnants of that on the child a week later?
Yeah. So,
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, just biologically speaking, between showers and, things like that nature, you usually lose a lot of evidence. So as a parent, right, you want to be on the ball. And
even if, there's no emissions or bodily emissions that can be, preserved, you have some kind of record that, an incident took place and you went to the ER for that reason.
Yeah.
And then you report to the authorities. I'm assuming that's the next
or
step.
you have trace DNA like underneath the fingernails, right? They swap on that. Hair, right? Follicles. There's so many different ways you can test for that stuff. But before we even get to that, number one thing is your child okay?
Yeah.
Because some sick people out there in the world, and first thing that matters is the victim's well-being post crime. So number one, I would say get to the doctor and make sure psychologically, mentally, physically that child or person is safe. Number two, gather the evidence, and hospitals are very well trained, even if masjids are not, as to what is testable, what can be collected, and what
marks on the skin,
anything. Then they can record that data for you.
So if a parent came to you at the mosque and said, "Hey, so when something happened to my kid at the mosque," you would say, "Take him to the ER." Number one, take him to the ER. We'll call the cops while you take him to the ER or whatever. Get the authorities involved. Does that sound right, or?
Yeah, so so that's from the parent's perspective, not from the board's perspective. So I'm a board member. Somebody comes up to me and says, "Hey, something happened." Let's use a child in this example, so we can stay consistent. Something happened to my son. He was in a class, and some teacher did something to him. So I would say, you get to the ER, and we'll help you get in contact with the police.
But what if it's as simple as like saying something lewd rather than, because we're talking about an extreme case where in the masjid it's very difficult to find a situation where somebody, let's be straightforward, where they can emit bodily fluids onto a child or a person, right? I mean, that's...
But we have very little to go off of. Like, you're talking to a child, right? And the child doesn't know even things about like emissions and stuff like that. What I think Asrar is saying is, in order to just rule that out, you just do that and you get that taken care of, so that, okay, well, even if it's just a simple matter as a grabbing situation where somebody just grabbed them over clothes, that's still okay. I mean, you're not hurting anyone by
exhausted all of the options. So
by taking them to the ER, you've established that an incident took place, not just and then are collecting possible evidence. So go on. I'm sorry.
Another possible. So now that's the biological evidence. So let's move past that, because that's something that we wouldn't be involved in.
Right.
But that's something we want to make sure the well-being of the child. So now you come back and say, well, suppose it's not a situation where it's like, where body fluids and all that stuff, right? So suppose
you were talking about as a board member. You were saying before you got.
So now I'm at a board. Now I'm talking from the perspective of a board member. Now my job is to make sure I know what evidence is available on my side. Witnesses, number one. Other children, classmates, teachers, cameras, right? And I'm collecting this not to run my own investigation. This is where I think my real sticking point with this topic is that you know to call the police, to go to the hospital. That's not a new revelation. I haven't added anything to the conversation.
And as a board member, you're trained. You know that when you come on the board, this is how we operate, right?
Not always.
Okay.
Not always, because these topics are not foreign to some masjids in a good way. Right. But I would say what you want to do is maintain masjid integrity, meaning that you never want to give any portion of your community the ability to say to you that you didn't take this matter seriously. Not just optics, but really, number one, as a board member, you're a custodian of the house of Allah, and whatever happens underneath it, to the extent that you're privy to it, your job is to make sure that you act in a reasonable manner. In the case of your own congregants, it's beyond a reasonable matter. You have to treat them like your own child,
Yeah.
I think. So independence is what I was going to get to. When the masjid does this kind of stuff, you should facilitate the gathering of the data, but I don't think that you should be the body that evaluates the data. That's my big sticking point. I think that there should always be an independent third party who gives you the clear. And honestly,
Shouldn't that? I mean, but wouldn't the police just tell you like, hey, we need X, Y, and Z. We need video surveillance. We need witnesses. Wouldn't they just tell you as a board member that, hey, gather all these pieces of evidences for me. I need you to turn over evidentiary pieces.
yeah, so the police would guide you to what it would take to prove that a crime has been committed.
Yeah.
Reasonable suspicion, reasonable doubt, right?
So why would you? Now you were talking about a third party. What's that
He's
all
saying
I
you're
think
not,
what he meant
you're
by
not
this law
interpreting.
enforcement,
You're not interpreting the evidence.
Yeah, so a police officer would say, look, there was a car accident here, okay? So, and you say car A struck car B, okay?
Yeah.
That car hit my car, and it's a parking lot. So a police officer looks around and says, there's no shattered glass here. Where this car is hit and where that car is hit, it doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah.
And the collision just doesn't make sense to me. There was no crime, okay? So because they look at everything, the environment wasn't raining, no one was drinking and driving, blah, whatever. They go through that, right? But there was an accident here. So, there was an accident here. So what you want is you want an independent third party to go through the data and come to a conclusion as to whether or not there could have been something that happened here, because we're dealing with a life. And
But who is it that you're referring to as third party? Sorry to cut you off. Who's the third party?
So there are a lot of different places that do this kind of stuff. There's what ends up happening, and masjids aren't big enough yet. Okay, but if you look at what happens like in the Catholic Church and in other places, they hire law firms. And when you have corruption instead of corporations, right? You have government agencies that are responsible for how corporate governance, right? Our corporations stealing money and all that stuff. Well, why is it that not every time this happens, it's not revealed by a government agency? What happens is a board member on the board of the corporation will say, I think there's malfeasance in the company. So what the board will do is organize and hire a law firm to come out and go through all the corporate governance procedures, follow the data, trail the data,
Essentially perform an audit.
yeah, but a real one,
Right.
because they're trying to get to something. Whereas an audit generally says, hey, you're doing what you're supposed to do, these are rules or whatever. But these guys are actually conducting an investigation.
Yeah.
They're interviewing people, they're taking recorded statements, those kind of things.
Okay. So in terms of what a lot of the organizations that are starting up across the country, and you don't have to name any if you don't want, but is that what they're doing? So some of these Muslim organizations that are actively working to introduce some kind of a third space for victims to go to in regards to sexual abuse.
Yeah, so unfortunately, in a lot of different ways, the people who have been the subject of these types of topics have been leaders in the community. Some big names come to mind. I won't say them here, but so what happens is that it's really quick for the victim to become a black sheep in the community. So that's why I say independence is really important. Because what if somebody comes up to you and says, like this family has been in this generationally established the masjid. Now their grandfather, did something to their child. Well, the musallis and everyone else in general is going to say, no, I have dinner at these people's houses. No, I know these people.
Yeah.
No, my family married into this family. There's no way this family did it. That doesn't mean anything. That kind of evidence is not evidence of anything. Yeah. It's still very likely it could have happened. I mean, it still could have happened, not that it's likely. And so in recent situations, you've seen that, where some of the masjid crowd stands up for a person. How? Just because he said no? I've never met a criminal that says yes.
You're right.
And one other thing to remember about these crimes is that they're behavioral crimes. So let me give you an example. Murder could happen in there's a type of murder. It's called the name's slipping my mind, but it's called like depraved heart, or heat of passion.
Uh-huh.
That what happens is you walk in, you see something that you shouldn't see, and
Your
all of a
mind
sudden,
flips.
your mind flips and you go and you kill somebody completely. It's not you. It's out of body experience. You did kill him. You do go to jail for it. But the court says it's not premeditated. You didn't walk into the room thinking you're going to plan this to kill somebody, right? Mm-hmm. People who go after women and children and, things like this, it's a profile of a person. So what happens is they operate within a culture. They get the trust of the people. Then they get the trust of, so the musallis at large. They walk in and they're just like, you're like, wow, this person is untouchable. He's like, he's infallible. It's okay, good. Now you got the community's trust. Then you move to a smaller circle, your target circle. Maybe it's a class you teach.
Is that what they refer to as a target circle?
I'm
basically
saying,
okay.
I'm saying that.
Sorry, I'm just
yeah, no, but it's like a target circle. So now you
picture target.
Yeah, because look, whatever you're going to do, you can't do in open space.
Yeah.
Right.
Sorry.
We're still thinking about the target circle.
ADD kicking in. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, targets.
Is that a legal term?
Well, targets
No,
are
I
going to
just made
sponsor
that
the
up.
show now, right? Yeah.
I was just trying to describe you something simple.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you want to move from a larger place to an isolated situation.
Yeah.
But you need to cross those lines through trust. So there's a level of this person's like a sociopath, and then but knows. And
so are you saying generally they're not reckless with it? They think about it very, very carefully, and that's basically the profile of the person.
I'm trying to think of a way to analogize the desire to do it without linking the scenario. Like, if a kid really wants candy, his desire of it leads him to do things that he would never do otherwise, right? Like he'll come up with creative arguments, or whatever else. So this person, and I don't know if calling them mentally ill is giving them a free pass, because I don't want to give them a free pass as in you made a conscious effort to do this. I don't want to give them an excuse. But this person has what
tricky.
Yeah. So I'm not going to go there, but this person has this whatever urge to commit this act. So now he's going to get creative to figure out a way to do it. What came first, the chicken or the egg? Was it the position of being a leader that led him to become narcissist and want to, kind of like go through this situation? Or was it the fact that he's already been this way and he found himself to become out? And I'm telling you, I think the Catholic Church is a great, not great.
I'm not sure it's great, because the Catholic Church had a widespread problem throughout the country, and a lot of researchers came to the conclusion it's because of the nature of celibacy and how it's implemented in Catholicism that kind of led towards that abuse, and I don't think that's a same apples to apples comparison in our community. And I know there are people who are trying to make that correlation that, that do masjids in America have a sex abuse problem. And I think that's a stretch.
It's not that I wasn't going there. What I was saying though,
but when you do comparisons to that, people automatically start thinking along that lines. Well, you know what? Maybe it's not just one or two victims, and maybe it may not be. But they're indicating at an epidemic type scenario. And I don't think that is the case here. I think these are situations that are happening that are isolated, but it happens. Yeah. But there are people who seek to make them much more bigger than they actually are.
I see what you're saying.
They're not apples to apples to the extent that we're talking about the actual crime, as in, rape. But as far as the old boys culture, that's prevalent, because where do most people come from? They come from back home, and so now they're exposed to a situation where, women aren't equals, but they didn't grow up that way. So it's tough.
Yeah.
I've been witness to a conversation that made me really uncomfortable. And it wasn't a scenario where I think that a crime was committed, for sure. But it was indecent. Like one of the people that I know really well in the community said something to a sister that I was sitting next to, and I was like, at worst, that's tasteless. At best, that's tasteless, and at worst, that's it's creepy. And in my situation, I think the right response is she should be able to slap you. I think a lot of times those problems were solved that way, right? Somebody gets harassed at the masjid, her brothers come, they knock the dude out, and and it's game's over. Right? Didn't know to call the police, and the guy knows what's up.
I had to do that once.
Yeah, so
it was not pretty.
But yeah, I think a lot
We'll
of
get some juicy details after
Yeah,
this.
yeah,
There'll be like an offline convo that like you guys will not be privy to.
yeah.
But like one thing I'll tell you is that one thing I didn't think would be helpful just because it's corny was those training situations where they tell you like how to behave in certain situations and having like consultants come out,
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, like in a workplace, that might not be as necessary. But when you have a situation where gender divide is the norm, like in a masjid, and then now you have a situation where a lot of masjids are more free flowing, not in the mosque area, obviously, but just in the hallways, the community events or whatever. I don't know. I think some of those lines from those training courses may not be a bad thing. It makes
agree.
sense. It makes
I
sense
agree.
where they should be applied.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But and now the responsibilities of imams and other employees at a mosque, especially when you add on to the fact that there's a public school that's been integrated to a mosque, that role is growing, and now there's a lot of interactions between people of the opposite gender, and there's meetings that are happening oftentimes in closed doors. What do you think
You're
of-
referring to private schools, right?
because mosques that have integrated or implemented a private school
Yeah.
segment to their
Of course.
things that they offer, right?
Yeah.
Because nowadays a mosque can't just be a mosque.
Yeah.
I mean, it can, but you're just kind of your whole goal of a mosque is to
Community center,
be a community center, be a place for everything.
education, everything.
Yeah.
Everything.
But this is where Shaykh Amir's expertise comes in, because this is the residual Islamic question. Because even with the Me Too movement, you have people on the right saying, well, now my sons have to be scared, right? Because everywhere I go and every situation they're going to be in, a woman can accuse them of raping them, right? That's what they're saying.
Yeah.
On the left, they're saying that if a woman comes across and says she's been raped, then you have to believe her. And the extremes, I'm saying.
Yeah.
And most people are somewhere in between. So you have in the mosques the same thing, because Islam itself says to you that in that are the answers for these gender relation problems.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So when you try to apply them verbatim, right, as written, a lot of women, their issue with that is that when you have these meetings and you have these situations where men and women separated or whatever, that the women are marginalized in a sense that, I think one of the examples given was that there was a big meeting and the meeting split for Salah time, and the leaders of the committee were men, right?
Yeah.
And the women were also in the committee. And so the men, after Maghrib Salah, just stayed behind
In the masjid and started chilling.
and just started chilling. And in that, they had some important conversations, and the women felt like, hey, we can't join you in the masjid area. You guys are discussing important issues as it pertains to the committee,
In a casual talk.
In a casual
you're no
talk.
longer in a meeting. Now you're just like buddies now. You guys are talking about important things.
Yeah.
Right?
So, and so how do we reconcile the Islamic solution with the women's concerns? I mean, that's the issue that in the masjid, I don't have.
I think for the listeners too, I think one thing we have to understand is that these issues have always taken place, as far as all the way from harassment on a light level, even though nothing harassment is light, but let's say non-touching, like verbal harassment, even like, cues and body language, all the way from that to from weird looks to verbal harassment to touching, light touching, to molestation, to raping. All that's always happened everywhere, in all places. And obviously it's not the majority of human beings. There's always a very, very small group of people that do that. So when you talk about masjid, you have to understand that the masjid is a place full of human beings. And you're going to have, even though you shouldn't have to expect it, but you're always going to have some people there that are going to be a little deviated, right?
Right.
Whether it's deviated sexually or they weren't taught manners, right? And the point that interests me, what you're saying, is that when there aren't lines drawn out how men and women conduct themselves, there can be certain guys that have just a certain tone of voice, and when they talk to a woman, the woman may think that he's hitting on her or something, or there's some innuendo occurring, right? So that's why you should, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, when he's even referring to women in Surah Al-Ahzab, he says, فَلَا تَخْضَعْنَ بِالْقَوْلِ فَيَطْمَعَ الَّذِي فِي قَلْبِهِ مَرَضٍ وَقُلْنَا قَوْلًا مَعْرُوفًا. He says to women, when you talk to men, don't talk in a very breathy, flowery voice, because for men, cues, verbal cues are very, very interesting, and we could discuss this some other time. But so if a woman is extra nice or just nicer to a man, most men or many men will think, wait, I think she likes me.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is very, very clear when He says to the women, وَقُلْنَا قَوْلًا مَعْرُوفًا. When you speak, just speak with clarity, things that you have to talk about, and don't use a voice. Don't be overly joking, because
try be as monotonous as possible.
Monotonous as possible. Even like, I see some Muslim women hold it down in the Muslim world when they're talking to men, especially like at a cash register. They're like almost rude, right? And they do that intentionally because they know what can possibly occur. And the same thing I think goes with men also. I think men, if we have to be in a situation of a meeting where you're talking with women and stuff, I think we have to try to be as serious as possible, even though it can get very comfortable. But everybody, if you talk to 5 different women in the same tone of voice, some of them may perceive it differently, or, I think that being said, that's always been there. That's always going to be there. And the Quran talks about it in detail. So we shouldn't think that, now all of a sudden masjids have this major problem. No, this problem has been a societal problem from the beginning of time and it's going to be there to the end of time.
But I think you come from a very unique position as an employee at a mosque.
Yeah.
And
at a school,
yeah, at
school, yeah.
At a private school of a mosque, right?
Yeah.
How has recent events changed the way you or even the faculty at the mosque operate?
That's a great question, because private schools generally are very sheltered. So it really doesn't even, you kind of just have like simple talk about it amongst yourselves, but nobody really talks about it. I mean, you have harassment training,
right,
and all that kind of stuff.
But you're in more of a unique position as a counselor and someone who's not just a teacher, but also...
I mean, I'm not really a counselor, but I get a chance to
your interaction with students may end up leading to a counseling session.
Yeah, possibly, okay. Yeah. But I think that I don't think private schools are really affected by it too much. We try to take as many precautionary measures as possible, even with the boys and girls. They can't talk in the hallways unless it's being supervised by a teacher. They can't be talking alone unless a teacher is supervising them. I have to teach female students too, and I have to make sure that my class is very different when there's female. It's just the way things work. People don't like hearing this, but the dynamics change. Yeah. Right? When you have all males, the dynamic is a certain way, which is what I prefer, is because there's certain things I could talk about without having the females feel uncomfortable. But there has been situations where things are very, sexual in nature, or something in the Quran is mentioned that refers to how you go about whether it's marital relations with your wife or whatever the case is. And if it's an Islamic question, I have to remind them, listen, before I begin, as matters of knowledge and deen, there's no reason to be extra overly bashful, because you can't be ambiguous when you answer a question Islamically, right? You have to be very straightforward. The reason why that has to be mentioned is so nobody gets any mixed messages, when you're explaining something. And you have to make sure you're looking directly at the guy's side when you're explaining those things. Right. So that's very, very important, I think. Extremely important.
But as far as any closed door meetings,
do I have to sit alone with a woman in a closed door meeting? No. Alhamdulillah. No.
Okay.
Alhamdulillah.
I mean, how is MCC handling it? Are there any closed door sessions happening?
No, from my experience and from what I've seen, even with my own eyes, there aren't. And if there are, they leave the door open.
Yeah.
But that's just a bad idea.
Yeah, no, even with us,
that's a bad idea
in classes with students, like you do, like some teachers are tutoring after school, they have to make sure that both the teacher and student are visible from the window, right? You can't be like in a corner. Yeah. You have to make sure they're both visible. Both student and teacher have to be able to see the exit, and people should be able to see them, right? And doors should obviously be opened, and all that good stuff. It should never be closed. It should never be hidden away. Those are all things that we all have to just be a part of protocol.
Yeah.
And I think that it's 'cause we hit a lot of different topics. Like, I think that we should just, from like a community and a Muslim perspective, like, and a masjid perspective, somebody arrives to you and they say that, hey, we have a situation here. Let's and what happened. Let's leave that out for now. What should I do if it warrants it? Take the kid to the hospital, or the person to the hospital. In the meantime, start preserving evidence and get the authorities involved off the bat, in my opinion. But you have to understand one thing. For you to take this kind of flight, start putting these things into motion, you have to have a culture where you believe the victim.
Yeah.
That's the important thing. And believe the victim to the extent that you don't take aim at the perpetrator yet, because you don't want to start things, that are haram, like backbiting, and just making up things behind, just making up things.
Assumptions are very dangerous.
Yeah, assumptions, suspicions.
Very
You don't want to
dangerous.
start arousing those kind of things either. But you know what? You do the right thing procedurally, and it'll lead you to the truth. So, preserving evidence, like I said, getting people that are of authority involved off the bat, and then the medical exams, things like that, and witnesses. Witnesses are a big thing because giving false testimony in Islam is 100%, you and game ender for you, right? If you do that, and legally, it could be obstruction of justice.
Yeah,
it's a crime in itself. So both ways, witnesses are very important.
What if a situation arises where somebody at the mosque, doesn't matter whether they're an employee of the mosque or not, a visitor maybe, they just grabbed the kid. They did impropriety, something that is clearly illegal, or maybe it's not clearly illegal, and they just come and they tell you, Asrar, that hey, I'm reporting this thing happened from so and so individual at my mosque. I'm not sure if it's a big deal about reporting it to the police, but let's just say he grabbed one of his private parts, right? And I'm just reporting it to you, and I don't know if I want to make a big fuss about it. How would you handle it?
I'm probably the worst person to ask. No, mainly because once I know, I call the police. It's not a joke to me. You may not want to report it for purposes of not letting the community find out or whatever, for taboo purposes. I'm looking at it from a perspective of this kid's welfare. Number two, is this guy going to do it against somebody else?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's other people's children.
Yeah.
And number three, when you have a school and a masjid combined, you have, you get into that situation of, not that we are, but mandatory reporters.
Yeah.
Right? So.
And that's the key word, mandatory reporting. I think that's what's missing from the minds of everyone who could possibly be involved in a situation like this. You have to know the mandatory reporting laws.
Yeah. Schools, like as far as harassment is concerned and domestic violence on a child, like if you're suspicious that a child is being abused by his parents, like physically, you don't even contact the board of the school. You have to go straight to the authorities.
Wow.
Yeah, you can't involve anybody else. You got to go straight. If you see some marks on a child, and especially you have to ask them like, hey, how did this happen and all that. You don't talk to anybody in the school. You go straight to, the DCFS, and that's how you have to deal with it, because no one else is going to be able to deal with that. It's out of everybody's jurisdiction. And one thing I want to mention is the reason why we have to give this a little bit of context is we come from a culture where when you meet people, you hug them. Some cultures, you kiss people on the cheek, whether you're men or women, right? And some cultures, where you see men, they don't really kiss on the cheek, but they make a kissing thing like the French do, the on your cheek and stuff, and hugging. And that's why it can be a little tricky sometimes, That's why, a lot of people don't like to hear this because it goes against culture. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in a hadith, authentic hadith, he said the best way for us to greet each other is the handshake, a good handshake. It avoids all issues. It avoids a lot of problems. I still remember, even in the Muslim world, man, when people talk to the children, they say, if somebody's hugging you for too long, let us know. They shouldn't be hugging you for too long. But that's a problem, especially if it's a stranger,
Some of those Eid hugs do get weird.
Yeah, they do. But shaking the hand is good, except Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to do a hug while traveling, which was different. When he came back from a travel and he was meeting the Sahaba or something, they would do a hug, and one of the narrations says that they would kiss each other's shoulders. That's what he used to do. But other than that, it was always handshaking. And it's a good practice to have to teach your children, especially if you don't know somebody. And that's why it's tricky, man, because you come from a culture where everyone's supposed to be brothers and sisters, and I can imagine now, after you have children, you can imagine now how people that you don't know, And obviously, we have to be clear. It's not a majority of people. It's this very, very small group of people. But we don't know who's who. And we don't know what their motives are when they're hugging your child and all that kind of stuff, you know?
Can I just
go ahead?
I just want to just tie it back together from the youth perspective. And I was saying that MCC is really progressive in this matter because they have a bunch of youth on the board and just in leadership positions in the committees and etc. Because the hardest part about this to get people to come forward is to remove the taboo. So at least from on behalf of MCC, I'd like to say that if you ever gone through something like this in the masjid or anywhere else, number one, you're not going to be judged, inshallah, from at least from my own perspective.
Yeah.
Number one. Number two, we have to get to the truth. So come forward. We'll keep our confidence. I think all masjids should be saying this, right?
Yeah.
Is that you may want to identify how it happened or who it happened with, but you have to come forward. Number three, your spiritual and emotional and physical well-being are really important to us.
Yeah, far important than anything else. Yeah.
And number four, when you get through it, you're a survivor, not a tabooed person. Things like divorce and all these things used to be so taboo, but it's part of the human experience.
Yeah.
And people sometimes can't control the situation they've been in.
Yeah.
And sometimes we have these laws between how men and women should behave and all these different things, but sometimes dudes are, people out there are just criminals.
Yeah.
As in, you do everything you can from niqab and hijab and all those things, or have a beard.
People always find a way.
And these weasels find a way to come in.
So I think that even getting into what should we do, and sometimes it's just not your fault.
Yeah.
And if you're a victim, it's not your fault.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah. But what is your fault is if you don't handle it correctly. Like you don't know, you didn't educate your board or the people in your institution on how to educate.
What is protocol?
Yeah, well, what the protocol is when you hear about these type of situations. Like Asrar said, like if a parent tells you something happened to their kid, whether they want to report to the police or not, it becomes irrelevant. You told me, now I have to tell them.
Yeah, because right, public safety is number one concern. Your child's safety is number one concern. Yeah. I'm sorry if it might get you disinvited from some family parties for a little bit, but that child is our future.
So live with that for the rest of life.
And he's our future, and so we want to make sure that we take care of him.
I want to talk about something. You mentioned a point about not blaming the victim, and we're talking in the context of a child, but we've always talked about spiritual abuse on this podcast before in the last year. Similar, it could happen in the framework of an Islamic organization. So it's no secret, we'll put it out there. On our show, we've talked about when it comes to issues of females engaging, being, whatever, having some situation with someone in religious leadership, we have victim blamed. I don't know if you've heard those shows or not, but we've said stuff like, takes two to tango, et cetera, all this kind of stuff. Knowing what you know now and what's developed in America, not even just the recent cases or what's happened in the last couple of years, what's your take on that? Where do we go wrong, or do you agree with us?
No, see, that's why I was saying we have to divide this conversation to culture and legal process, right? Victim blaming is a type of harassment, right? We're talking about how when you bring up a certain term, you have to ask, what do you mean by that term?
Yeah.
Right? So when you say victim blaming, the sense that I get from it is that, are you such an old boys club that when somebody comes to you and says, hey, something like this has happened to me, you say, yeah, get used to it or get out of here, right? Yeah. That's the victim blaming that we're talking about. Of course, okay, the men and women like each other, right? So you may have a situation where two people meet, they like each other, love goes sour. If you think I'm making it up, read legal cases, hundreds and thousands of legal cases of love stories gone wrong. And one person blames the other for a lot of different things. But what I'm saying to you, from a board perspective, I'm not the jurist, right? So when it comes to me, I will treat it as something bad happened to this person.
As a civilian, yeah.
That's right. He, child, whoever it is, right? Is coming to me with a grievance. How do I ensure this grievance is handled in the most independent and fair manner while it's in my hands, because the police might investigate and say, oh, let's make the guy the victim, so it doesn't sound as thing. So the guy says, this girl, she slapped me, whatever, or she said I look really cute and it made me uncomfortable. So he comes to us. So now we go to the police. The police might come back and say, no, this guy's blaming this girl. It turns out that actually he made a pass on her, right? So now you're like, okay, well, we can't believe everyone's story off the cuff. But when an allegation comes to us, how do we treat it?
That's very important. Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
So people at the mosque will, or somebody who didn't handle the situation correctly, they'll say, well, what about institutions like schools where bullying happens or a fight breaks out? People don't report that to the police. Like how? I mean, is it the same? Because is it not like sexual abuse is different from just physical violence that happens at a school?
Basically, assault and battery and sexual harassment and battery linked to sexual stuff. Is that different? You're asking?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's different to the extent that we are not look, if somebody gets bullied and they get beat up, the bruises and stuff are there. You just it's done, right? But when you're talking about things like making somebody feel uncomfortable, harassment, these things are hard to prove. We're not equipped, to go through these situations. And
so even as a simple matter of harassment, let's just say it's sexual harassment, okay?
Yeah.
Somebody reports it to you at your board. What do you report that as well to the cops?
It depends. I mean, it depends to the extent of the harassment, right?
I mean, but I'm thinking from your perspective as what you're liable for, what your job is. I mean, I'm thinking if I was working on a board tomorrow, any type of anything with sex hyphen or sexual hyphen abuse or impropriety happening, I'm just picking up the phone and calling the cops. Like, let's sort this out because you came to me. Now I have to do something about it. I'm not going to be an investigator and try to sort out what's fact from fiction, who's telling the truth, who's not.
Yeah, it's a very tricky situation, man, because sometimes you have to be like, is it really? Like, I want to know. And I think when we take upon that situation, it becomes dangerous. Like, if somebody comes up to you, and I know you asked them the question, but it's related to this. Somebody comes up to you and says, or comes up to me or any of us, and if we're working at a masjid, somebody says, I think this person is sexually harassing me. That's very different than this person is sexually harassing me. Now, as a problem-solving being, as a human being, I think where it's very, very dangerous is when we try to be like, okay, let's find out if this was sexual harassment or not. And that's almost like a natural thing to do as a human being, but it shouldn't be us doing that, right?
Yeah, you've got at the end of the day cover your own butt.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
You gotta protect yourself because
so should people not even be coming to the masjid board? They should go straight to the police. I mean, that should be the conversation, right?
Well, that as a parent, I'm thinking that's the most obvious thing.
Yeah,
like why would you even call anyone? Just call the
people
cops.
are so used to going to their masjids for everything and counseling and because
right, and okay, and, granted, but I think given what Asrar has said, it seems like the most logical and most efficient technique is just picking up the phone, calling the cops, letting them sort out what the nature is. You want to make sure you first. I mean, obviously you want justice for the victim, right?
Yeah.
But you also want to make sure that you're not liable for any type of indiscretion or some kind of.
But let's take it back for a second because this happens in masjids. I've seen it happen in masjids. You have catcalling men when there's a hallway that's both men and women, right?
Yeah.
I've seen it.
Yeah.
That's sexual harassment. Do we call the police? No. Because what you want to do in that situation is remove the person.
Yeah.
That's a simple way out. When I say call the police right away, I'm talking about
abuse.
Something's gone down. Something is. And we know the difference.
Right,
hopefully, so we know the difference between those two things. But when this chaos happens between should I call the police, should I not call the police, does this rise to the level of that, is we don't have protocol. So that's why I was saying that somebody to come and help you establish policies and procedures. Because suppose that you have the situation where employee of the masjid tells a female coworker, come sit in my lap while we discuss this. Pretty bad. That's borderline.
Say it again?
Come sit in my lap while we discuss this.
Yeah, right.
Okay,
this
said it pretty fast.
This happens in office spaces, right?
Yeah.
So suppose that happens, and the woman's like, "You're crazy. I'm out of here."
Yeah.
Now she comes and reports it to you. Now this is more than just a cat call.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah.
And but it's not exactly, rape,
Yeah.
right? So where are you right now? Do you call the police or not? Do you fire the employee or not? Is it just a reprimand and documentation or not? These are the gray areas. I mean, obviously, in this day and age, you get fired.
Yeah.
That end of story. How did you lead? What if the guy says, I never said that to her?
Yeah.
She literally just does not like me because I didn't give her a pay raise last week. How do companies and stuff do those kind of investigations right now?
HR,
Because HR does that, right? So policies and procedures are a really big deal, and that's where consulting firms come in and help you do that kind of stuff. So that's what I say is that as a board member, as a community member, as an imam, someone comes to you and says, hey, I have this really sensitive situation. What should I do? You need to have, when this occurs, like you don't want to look for the fire extinguisher when the building's burning down.
Yeah.
You should already know where it is, right? And my point is also is that somebody might tell you like, hey, I have a headache, and you're not a doctor, but you'll say, take a Tylenol.
Yeah.
It doesn't take a medical license to tell me, hey, just take a Tylenol, sleep it off or whatever, right? Drink some water. You might be dehydrated. But somebody comes to you and says, my heart's skipping a beat every, 10 milliseconds or whatever, blah, blah. That's nuanced, right? And you should not be the arbitrator, of that.
Yeah.
So that's my point, is that, somebody comes in and says, hey, I'm catcalling you. And you say, hey, dude, get out of my masjid.
Yeah.
You're making people uncomfortable. You're making the congregants uncomfortable. So the best resolution to this is that you're not allowed in here anymore. If we see you again, you're trespassing, right?
And I think we mentioned something really interesting. Alhamdulillah, all the Islamic schools have HR and stuff. Do you think, do masjids actually have HR? Wouldn't that make it so much easier if masjids actually had like a HR?
Yeah, I think that would be the greatest thing ever, because even in firing, you have wrongful terminations, and your masjid has had some turnover, at some levels. I think having an HR department streamlines the whole thing procedurally, where things get, when you hire somebody and you fire somebody, those situations are sensitive.
Yeah.
So you don't want the random Joe Show auntie or uncle coming.
But can HR, obviously if it's a religious institution, HR can extend to all the people that are congregating in the masjid too, whether they work for the masjid, they don't work for the masjid, right? Generally, that's what HR can do in a private institution, I think.
So, HR can serve a lot of different functions. Generally, HR only deals with employee matters, right?
Yeah.
But when you have suppose you slip and fall inside of a store, you're not an employee, or something like that. Or
Totally.
two people. What if two people shopping at a Walmart harass each other?
Yeah, you're right.
Right. So what happens? So so every company has some sort of protocol. What
I think we need to up our game with an HR in the masjids, man. That'll make things so much easier.
The reason
because they're trained and they know everything. You and I wouldn't have to figure things out.
And I think this topic really matters, because what we're trying to do is create the aura, this space where women are getting into the masjid. We're creating spaces from women. Like women, alhamdulillah, have been able to lead committees now and on the board, and so all these different things are happening, right? So when you do that, well, you can't have like a bachelor pad mentality.
Yeah,
that's
right.
what I'm saying.
You're
so
right.
it comes with the whole package.
Yeah.
You can't just say, oh, we just let you on the board. Oh, we let the youth on the board. So now, you have to sit and drink or chai or whatever, people drink coffee, people drink. I'm saying people's habits are different. People's comfort levels are different, and gender by gender, it's different. And new conflicts and stuff happen too. So create a situation where you accommodate for people, not just because by word, but through action too.
Yep.
One of the situations we have in our community, I don't know if this is if the Arab community has this problem, but Desi community has got an epic with shame culture. Like, even if you were wrong, like, I don't want this to get out because it'll shame my family.
Yeah.
It sounds to me like if the family came to you and was like, we don't want you to escalate this, even though you already got the scoop as a board member, it sounds to me like you still would be like, sorry, I still have to like call the authorities, right?
Yeah, look, depending on what it is, right?
If it's abuse, then you have to. If it was just like a cat call, then you don't.
Yeah, listen, I've been in situations where, off the masjid, okay, where people have, owned businesses and they know, like, someone's stealing from the business, but that person is like a good friend, So it's like a plea for help. But that person says, listen, I know this guy's doing this, and you're a lawyer, right? So what can we do? But I don't want this person to get in trouble. And it's serious because, in one situation, the other person was a person's spouse, was the husband stealing. So of course the wife knows eventually her husband's going to get caught. She doesn't want him to continue doing this behavior, because if he gets caught, he goes to jail, right? But no one has found out yet. So now it comes to me. What do you do, right? So in that situation, there was no victim. The victim was the business. Okay, so it's easier to work through and figure out how to do restitution in that situation.
Yeah.
Okay, but when there's a person involved, it's a completely different matter. I know we're desi, some of us, and
Bengalis are considered desi, don't
are they?
Of course.
Barely.
Nobody barely know they are.
We're actually we're actually Pakistani.
They're
the
more-
Khawarij rebelled separated us.
I wasn't gonna say that.
We're
No,
Pakistani.
you gotta get, Mahin. Mahin just says whatever he wants. It's great. That's why we love him.
There are a lot of things about our culture that's amazing. We add so much value to it, but there's a lot of it we don't need anymore.
Yeah.
We just don't need a lot of that. Cultural segregation for no reason, and what's the point of the baggage? People get depressed and get suicidal in this community because of being shamed.
Yeah.
Seriously. After divorce, parents don't come out to the community anymore. They hide behind a wall. The daughter's locked in a bedroom.
I know on that level. I know a family whose daughter is just like not married yet, and they stop going to functions because they're so ashamed that she's not married yet.
Yeah, no, that's another thing we should rant on, dude. I feel so bad for I know some people that have been married for 5 years, 10 years, don't have any kids yet. I know some girls that aunties go up to them and say, or sons, dudes, how come? Man, I think we have to be number one, patient with the older generation because they don't know, but they ask that question. Sometimes people don't answer that question of why I don't have kids anymore. I never understood that, right?
Some aunties be asking if
why don't you have
if
kids
the
yet?
dude's
Oh my
thing
God, it's been
works.
5 years. It's like
I'm serious. Some aunties be like, does this
when
thing
they're alone
work?
with the girls, they're probably
Yeah.
they're not gonna say it in public, but sorry, that's a whole different thing. My apologies for that.
No, I
rant,
mean-
but I just feel uncomfortable because I've been in a situation. I'm next to a dude, and they're asking him, "Oh, how come you don't have any kids yet?" I'm like, man, why are you asking this in public, dude? Poor guy, man. He just got married a few years ago. You don't know what his situation is. And same thing with aunties.
Just blame the wife.
As the default position of Mad Dog looks, blame the women.
Did you guys warn me about when the conversation
That's
goes
a
off the
joke, by
rails?
the way.
Oh, this is nothing. This is nothing. We're actually being very civil right now because we respect you a lot. But after a while, it can get pretty crazy. Just get Mahin excited, and he can say anything, bro. He's a firecracker.
That was a joke. You don't blame your wife for your
totally.
No, but I mean, some things are warranted, from our culture where we get blamed for things or whatever. And some things are just, but you know what? It's crazy. You see that same kind of thing at a different level exists in American culture.
Oh, yeah, it does.
Right? I mean,
of course.
it's not just a Desi thing. So, I mean, I apologize to Desi people and aunties and uncles for saying it that way. But when you just watch
Every culture has
this
that.
Kavanaugh hearing,
Yeah.
forget about what happened with, I mean, some people might be really upset about it still, but, God, it's like, this is the process of the Congress of the United States. It's embarrassing,
It's a sham, yeah.
because the truth is what should matter,
Yeah.
not the horse and pony
Truth
show.
Yeah.
seekers, you're right.
Not the yearbook.
Yeah, I mean,
You're in the schedule. 1984.
A 17-year-old's yearbook. What was that? I was just like, yeah.
But I know that we're going off topic a little bit, but another thing that we have to put in perspective, what I see from young kids and children, is the access to what they have on their phones and other apps, that so many things in sexuality is so normalized now. Even though we as human beings still have something in our innate nature to not like it and kind of not like harassment and when we see somebody being unjust with somebody else. But man, I was just talking to some brothers the other day. I think I mentioned this to Sim and I mentioned to you guys too. Obviously without mentioning the people's names, but dude, things are getting so out of hand with Muslim youth now that they send, whether it's any Muslim marriage app, they send nude pictures of each other to, even though they've known each other for 24 hours. And you'll see the same person,
Dudes sending pictures to other dudes.
No. Hopefully it's not that way, but
hopefully it's not anyway.
Hopefully it's not anyway. But I'm just saying, because I was going a certain train of thought, and he bought something else that I didn't even consider. That's the problem. He confused me. You don't do that with someone. You don't do that with someone with ADD. You confuse the heck out of us. But no, he was like, yeah, man. I thought this girl, she was really nice. She was hijabi and everything, and this and that. Literally 24 hours. And I told her, I'm not sure, and this and that. Then she sends nude pictures to me.
Whoa.
Yeah, and he's like, yeah, this happened more than once. I was like, are you
Did he
serious?
forward them to you too?
Astaghfirullah, no, he didn't. But he did not.
I recall. Well, I need evidence.
Collect evidence, man.
Alhamdulillah, I don't even have any of those apps, so that's great.
No, but you have to understand, like, the difference in generation is that suppose like a guy wanted to talk to a girl back, even when we were in school,
Yeah.
you had to know how to talk to girls.
Yeah, if you didn't,
I mean,
yeah.
you needed to know, say hi, what's up.
Yeah, you can't be nervous.
You can't be nervous. Now, literally, we come from like the generation where like when you had to sign up even for like Shadi.com or anything, like, not that I did, thank God, but like when you had to do that, you had to put like your name, your
Yeah.
what's your favorite interests, your hobbies, your sports. Now they swipe left and swipe
Yep,
right,
yep,
and
yep.
and now they have they have relations beyond.
Oh yeah,
But they
one night
should-
stands like
yeah,
no
it's
tomorrow.
crazy.
man.
So-
You don't even gotta talk to him in person.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
It was like it reminds me. I remember it was an old Fresh Prince of Bel Air episode, right? Where I think Will walks in and he sees some chick he's never met, and they just like don't even say. They run to each other and start making out. They're never met. So that's kind of how it is now.
Yeah.
So Fresh Prince was ahead of its time.
Yeah.
30 years.
Well, see, the thing is, we're talking about the Muslim community. And non-Muslim,
Yeah.
I mean, TV shows have always been like that, showing that fake thing of love. You see somebody, all of a sudden you fall in
Love
love
first
with
sight,
them.
yeah.
And that's all, But in the Muslim community, it's shocking that, Muslim girls and Muslim guys are sending nude pictures to each other, even though they don't know each other. But outwardly, they look like they're pretty practicing. You see them in community. Oh, so he asked, and this is where culture, another thing of culture is. And he's like, okay, I get it, but what's with the hijab if you're sending nudes? I mean, he actually asked her this.
So she
And
was
she's
not wearing
she's
hijab in the
she's-
nudes.
No, she's like, it's a culture thing. I have to wear it in public because
Oh.
my family is like this and this and this, so I can't. So it's also somewhat of a shame thing for her not to wear hijab, right? So of
Right.
course the shame thing goes kind of both ways, right? There's a whole lot of problems with culture, and that's why everything has to be overridden by the Sharia, man.
Since we're taking this conversation totally off the rail, I think that this is a time right now in the world where all the catastrophe / philosophical soul searching versus philosophical deviance,
Yeah.
is getting to the point where, if you imagine like, God, I'm going to sound like Sister Fob when I say this, but like in India, when they used to like strain the rice, like the dry rice,
Yeah.
they used to put it in what's called like a chutney, right?
Yeah. People still do that.
They'll do that,
There's
right?
nothing foul
So they
about
throw
that.
rice on that and then just keep throwing it up in the air until all the good rice stays inside and all the bad rice kind of falls off by
and all the dust and
mechanical
all stuff
process.
like-
Right? Yeah, that's what's happening. I mean, it's crazy when I talk to people and somebody's asked them like, oh, you're Muslim and I'm Muslim, meet them, and then the views that they have. One of my friends is she's Jewish, and she said to me, I met a guy over the weekend at a somewhere blah, blah, that gave a speech addressing Jesus Christ, and I was like, oh, that's good. He's Jesus Christ. She was like, I'm Jewish, right? So, but I was like, well, Mike Pence invited that guy, right? Remember after the synagogue shooting?
Yeah.
I think he was in Michigan. And the guy he invited was a Messianic Jew person, and the difference is I think Messianic Jews believe that Jesus was the Messiah. So at some point, like they say something where it's not even part of their religion anymore, right?
Yeah.
And that's happening so much in Islam in the youth today
Yeah.
that they're just saying so like whacked out stuff that you're just like, I get like people, in our time, people used to drink, and then say, oh, like, but I'm Muslim.
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah, it's sin, but he's still Muslim.
Yeah.
Now people are saying some crazy stuff where it's like, this the drinking was already, like kind of weird to me.
Yeah.
But the same drinking people never ate pork, by the way.
Yeah.
Right? For some reason,
Yeah.
they're like, alhamdulillah, I eat halal.
Yeah. Oh, you know
That's
what?
because pork doesn't give you a buzz,
You know,
I've heard that so many times. Yeah, I drink, but alhamdulillah, I don't eat pork.
I'll give even those people a free pass.
Yeah.
It's the people who change the core nature of our belief into, things like perennial ideas like, oh, well, the person who's from a Hinduism culture, they found their truth, and someone from Christian world, they found their truth, and the Jewish people, they found their truth, and so on, and we're all coming from this big river of truth. We're all saved, and we're all children of God, and I think that's what's
very
more
dangerous.
because that's being integrated into like mass media. Like I was just watching the show called Vikings, and in Vikings there's this priest who lives with the Nordic people who are pagans, and he also lives with the Christians who are in England, and he gets captured and he lives with them, and he kind of understands how they live, the pagans, and then he comes back to Christian England, and he's like, wait, some of the stuff that the pagans believed in was correct too, and he's like kind of like going between, like, I think they found their truth, and this is something that makes sense to them, and I think this kind of makes sense to you guys over here. And he's kind of struggling between that world. I haven't finished the whole series or anything, but he's kind of like coming towards that conclusion, or he's hinting at that, saying that what, it's all this stuff doesn't really make sense, or what's everyone really fighting about. And I think when you notice these things kind of being integrated into the media, and you see people, even close loved ones will start saying, well, why are we all at odds with each other, and it's not necessarily that we need to be odds with each other in terms of violence.
Yeah.
Our ideas and our beliefs are what will, they can completely be at odds with each other, but not at violent odds,
Yeah. There's still humanity involved.
Yeah. So I think that's something that's kind of really dangerous. That's kind of really weeded into our community.
No, it is, because everyone's right and no one's wrong, right? Postmodern thought. But you said something really interesting. I think it was on the Baba Ali podcast. And while you guys were talking about this idea, I was like thinking in my mind, you said it, is that if that's true, that everyone has a truth, then what's the point of being Muslim then? Like, why are we Muslim then? Right? Why is that important? Why is it important to be Muslim if everyone's correct? Right? And just because everyone's correct, it doesn't mean you have to hate them. That's a clear distinction, right?
Yeah.
Rasulullah, remember, we have to put everything back in perspective. He felt very, very sad when someone couldn't be saved, right?
Yeah.
So we have to look out for people as if we actually really, really, and we do. We care for them because we want them to be saved, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like, it's my team against yours. Like, no, dude, you got to be a part of this team, bro. I found the most amazing thing. I found the most beautiful thing, and you have to be a part of this, right? And you're a great person,
You know what started this whole mentality, right? Participation trophies.
Oh,
Yeah, that I am so. It's like, everyone's
this is the
a winner.
SR I wanted to see. This is the SR I wanted to see.
It's like when you start telling 4-year-old kids, everyone's a winner. No, they're not going to be a winner. Some of these kids are going to end up homeless. Some of these kids are going to end up doctors. Some of these kids are going to end up, this, and some of these that.
That's right. It's so funny you brought that up, because this past season was my first experience taking my son to baseball games, and they would always be wondering after the game, my son and his friends, like, who won the game? And I'm like, well, technically you guys won, but they won't say it. Well, why not? Because they don't want the other team to feel bad. They just want you guys to practice your skills.
Oh, that's a real thing?
Oh,
Yeah.
So it's not like this is
There's
not.
schools that are adopting this idea, dude.
Yeah.
Wow.
I thought it was like, liberal mumbo jumbo not liberal, but people who are anti-liberal, they make fun of liberals about that, this whole participation story and thing. And I thought it was just like something that maybe a few isolated incidences that may have happened throughout the country, but it's generally happening even in science fairs, like around the school, around the country. Everyone gets a ribbon. They either get a third place, second place, or first place ribbon. Whereas, when I was young, I took part in one of these fairs and I didn't get one. And I'm like, man, I sucked. My thing, I didn't really put in the effort to get.
But dude, losing, sorry, man, but losing is something that's kind of necessary for development of the brain too, man. You need that. You have to feel that. You have to experience it. It's like you said, it's a part of the human experience. We can't deny that and cause problems later in the child when they grow up.
They have to know how to get back up.
But they have to feel that feeling too. You have to feel hunger in order to appreciate food.
Yeah.
You have to be able to understand what winning is by losing, right? Yeah. Losing is a motivator. If it's not a motivator, then you have to counsel the child if they lose and let them know, hey, dude, it's not in the grand scheme of things, it's not the end of the world. Just come back, and if you don't, it's fine, dude. You're still going to be, even if you lose, even if you're 0-50, you're still great. It doesn't matter. And everyone's hardwired to do something in this world, and you're not going to win at everything. You win some, you lose some. And the best of all people have always lost in something, right?
Yeah, so
you have to feel
Shaykh
that.
Amir's point originally, it shouldn't be a surprise that, hijabis are sending nude pics to brothers because we have Muslims that want to celebrate Christmas now. Like we were talking on our WhatsApp. We want to put up Christmas tree. I mean, and I think that's the bigger issue, right? like what you're seeing here with these behaviors between like girls and guys is just a symptom of a bigger theological problem that Sim alluded to.
Yeah.
Perennialism being one of them, which has been imported from the. It's funny. I read a post. There was a HuffPost today article about a Christian who says because of like the amount of Muslims and Christians that make up the whole world, that we never get. The way for Christians to get along with Muslims is for Christians to accept Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam as a prophet.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys saw that HuffPost article.
No,
or
I
not.
did see it.
You saw it?
No, I didn't.
And I'm like, well, and I forwarded it to some of my Christian friends, and they were like, well, this person wouldn't be a Christian anymore.
Yeah.
And then we started talking.
And I can respect that, dude.
Yeah.
I can respect, dude.
Yeah.
When Christians hold their ground, I respect them a lot, dude. And that's the same thing with Muslims. A lot of it has to do with, I don't like using, conservative Muslim, liberal Muslim, right-wing Muslim, and left-wing. Sometimes we have to use it in perspective so people understand.
Right.
But the dilemma with Muslims aligning themselves with something, whether it's conservative or liberal, and saying, I'm a liberal politically and I'm a liberal Muslim, the problem with that is the liberal movement is something that Muslims believe has saved them, and they're a part of if you're a Muslim, you're a part of the liberal. So now it's becoming like a political thing. And
oh yeah, I remember when recently Mahin and a couple other brothers who were, talking about a lot of conservative points, they freaked the heck out of a couple other brothers who they were like, man, we never knew these type of Muslims existed.
Yeah,
this is like seeing a unicorn for the first time.
No, and do you understand? I wasn't very articulate when I said that, but Muslims, they sense like, yeah, we're with the liberals now, so they adopt all the idea. So their Islam is now a branch of liberalism, and it becomes very problematic, dude, because now you have to side with people that have nothing to do with Islam, but that becomes your Islam now. That's one of the things that's occurring now, is that, hey, we're Muslims and we side with the liberals, so they flourish in the liberal spectrum in that realm, and it becomes something counter, or contradicts liberalism in the Quran. They'll definitely not like it, and it doesn't sit well with them, right?
It's not that. It's just that we fit the victim narrative right now.
Yeah.
So we're useful.
Yeah,
I mean, if some of the parties that are on
that should
liberal
be written in gold, by the way. That's why we're useful.
Yeah, but once they open up a Quran and read what we write about some of the liberal, like
liberal positions. Yeah.
I mean, Islam does not believe in free speech, right?
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, a lot of speech is sin.
Yeah.
So right.
That's a beautiful point.
Backbiting is a sin.
Yeah.
Slander is a sin. But under the alms of free speech, it's totally acceptable and it's your God-given right. The same guy who's going to smite you in Islam for saying such things. So, there's some of these are like ultra-liberal positions, and especially like hate speech. It's definitely not part of Islam.
Yeah.
You cannot slander a person for their belief. You can't go up to Christians and say so such and such. You can't go up to Jewish people and say such, or Hindus or anybody, right? Rasulullah was not somebody who insulted people. He was a genius. Yeah. So he was able to have discussions with people and in a few words convince 1.7 billion people to be here.
So,
what's funny to me is that that we always talk about how other countries are like third world, and if they had education, they wouldn't be doing these kind of things. But the way we talk in the country today is as if we never graduated from kindergarten.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, seriously, like the points people are making, and some of these voter interviews that they do, like, did you vote for Trump or did you vote for Hillary? And the arguments people are making for why they do either way, you're just like, have you ever taken a civics? Like, have you,
Did you even graduate junior high?
Yeah. Like your point, it's not even a point. Because by the time you start, when you start realizing and go issue by issue, you realize every human being, and this is the genius of Islam and the Rasulullah, is that you always land somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Social welfare for all? I'm there. But who? How? What?
Yes.
Right? Healthcare? For sure. Right? This topic? I don't know. Do we allow these people to marry? I don't know. So you can't take everything. It's a la carte versus carte blanche.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, just Asrar for coming through, man. So, like, is there any? I know you're only the board of MCC. Would you, if there's someone from another community that wanted to solicit, advice from you guys? Do you guys do that kind of stuff or?
Yeah. So, and this is what's going to happen. And this is the scary part. Now I'll make it short because I know we're running out of time. But one of these masjids in America is going to become the legal guinea pig, right? And then we're really going to find out what's what. Because what are the ramifications of not reporting, over-reporting, under-reporting, having policy procedures, having incorrect policy procedures?
Yeah.
There's going to be some variant of a masjid that's either halfway in, halfway out, or not in at all. That's going to get taken to court because something happened on their property, right?
Yeah.
What I'm saying to you is that it's better if we all just come together and come up with a unified response, so that when you sue like Masjid X, then you're suing 40 other masjids because we all follow the same policies and procedures, and you know what I mean?
Right.
And so we show force and numbers. Listen, legal fights happen in 3 different ways. Number 1, the victim is the story.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Number 2, the law. When people are talking about like, it's my God, my First Amendment right to say something, constitutional crisis, right? These kind of things where the law is the thing, right? Number 3, it's total media output. So a court never makes its way into a case never makes its way into a courtroom, but you hear masjid struggling with, Bawa policy and victims arising out of, everywhere. You know how fast we lose that battle?
Yeah.
No army of lawyers is going to help the Muslim community beat the third narrative when it becomes just, out in the media, because we're not prepared for that. We don't have an anti-defamation league. We don't have an ACLU. We don't have, we have CARE. I guess it's good to, maybe a CARE representative would be better at answering that. How would we get? But, does CARE really want to be caught between a masjid and a Muslim?
No.
Right?
Conflict of interest.
Yeah. I mean, where is their stance on victim blaming and I'm not putting them out on the
we're just thinking out loudly. And
out loudly, right?
You came with the topic and we came with the topic, but we could talk about whatever we want. That's a beautiful thing about this, right?
So much is organized in that regard, and so I believe at this point we have so many intelligent people on the boards and so many professional people that policy procedures will come through, that we'll be able to investigate these things properly. At least in Chicago, I think people are very sensitive, but I don't know if we have a media arm that can counter if somebody wants to make a negative story out of the Muslim community, saying these things are rampant, and one false story, right?
Right. Well, that's what we're trying to counter, right? Because this whole thing about starting up a million different organizations for sex abuse, that yes, no one's denying that it doesn't happen. That it doesn't happen. What we're trying to say is that yes, it happens, but it's not as big as you're trying to make it out to be. It's not the Catholic sex abuse scandal. Okay, there was a few incidences that happened, but it's not big enough to warrant these organizations' existence.
Yeah.
And that's what like, what's the point of 4 or 5 different organizations opening up, trying to corner this market of Muslim sex abuse, or the Imam wolf, the wolf sheikh, isn't that what they call us? Yeah.
Now I was just going to say, those organizations, and they're probably already doing this, and I may be woefully unaware, if they just come and say, we'll help you draft your policies and procedures.
Yeah.
Just have a seat at the table. You're a big masjid. What you do matters. And if you do it, other masjids will want to follow suit.
They have to.
Right?
Yep.
Right? So, I think that I speak on behalf of only myself here.
Yeah.
But if they made a proposal to the masjid and said, hey, you know what? We may not agree on a lot of different things, but we will agree on the fact that there should be a fire extinguisher in case of a fire.
Yep.
And we'll help you locate it, write it, agree upon the language. Bring your ideas. The whole point is that we can't be ignorant and shut everything out at the same time. You can't let every idea in. We have limits within our deen also, right? So to the extent that we can work out something, we're definitely open, aware, sympathetic, and we're vigilant. Inshallah, khair, and may Allah make it so that nobody in our community goes through something like this. In the instance that somebody unfortunately does, may Allah make the custodians of the masjid competent, and bring justice to the people that deserve it.
Yeah. So Jazakallah Asrar for coming through. For those of you guys who know, Asrar has been friends with Shaykh Amir and Sim for a long time. They go way back. And actually, I did Hajj with Asrar, and for all you guys out there,
you guys did Hajj together?
Yeah, that's where we met.
For all you guys who think that Mahin Islam is a deviant, Asrar can attest that he saw me on Arafah.
I can't tell you what he was doing there, but I saw him there.
I was there. And as we wrap up here, quick shout out to the people that pay the bills here. Now, if you guys would donate to us, we wouldn't. You don't hear about our sponsors, but because y'all ain't donating, we gotta talk about your money. Go to Wahed for your money. Keep that money halal. Get yourself a halal spouse. Go to halfardeen.com and get yourself a halal. What's the last thing? A halal will. You know, so
Made in as little as 15 minutes.
Yes.
yeah, 15 minutes and we have a discount code for that.
Check it out in the description.
In the description at mywasiya.com for our special guest Asrar Ahmed and my co-host. Oh,
wait.
I gotta forget. iTunes 5-star, man. Y'all been slacking. 5-star. If you guys want content still coming, y'all need to be on iTunes. Tell your friends about us. People say like we love your podcast. It's like let me see your phone. Like there's no review. So I don't know how to do that. It's like just Google it, man.
Yeah.
You listen. We're the number one Muslim podcast out there as far as content downloads go, right?
Yeah.
And we're putting out multiple stuff weekly.
Yeah.
We're talking about 2 YouTube lives.
Mad Mondays, Taboo Thursdays.
Taboo Thursdays. I know Sim's working on some other stuff to add to the mix on top of a weekly podcast.
Yeah. And also check into our Patreon as well. I know he's pitching you guys the reviews, but now I don't have any more hope for you guys about the reviews. You guys aren't going to do it. But at least check out the Patreon account, patreon.com/the Mad Mamluks.
Yeah, if you could everybody could give a recurring donation of $100 a month, that would be fantastic.
That's the top tier.
Now we're starting to sound like a masjid.
We're hoping $5 to $10 is something that is completely within your
I thought
means.
Sim was going to interject, like, even if it's 25 cents, say Bismillah and do it. But
No.
ain't no 25 cents.
There's nothing lower than $5. I think.
$5. Yeah, like it's like a Starbucks Frappuccino, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you can't afford $5, then I just don't want your money. Just submit it to somebody else.
Yeah, and make sure you
$5 a month is something fair.
Yeah.
With the amount of content we offer, I think it's unparalleled compared to any other podcast out there or any other YouTube channel out there. We outwork everyone. It's just the way we do it.
Alhamdulillah.
For sure. So, for our special guest, Asrar Ahmed, my co-host, Shaykh Amir, Saeed, and Sim, this is Mahin signing off for the Mad Mamluks. Assalamu alaikum.